It's interesting you talk about feeling burnt out and not wanting to go back to get a master's degree. And it sounds like, I don't know, to me, we tell ourselves lies, little lies to justify our actions or our inaction. And I can't tell you how many times I have told myself I'm not ready to do something because I don't have enough life experience or I don't have this knowledge. How big of a role did that play when you were going through your various careers, trying to find something that was truly fulfilling to you?
Oh yeah, that comparison to the outside world, which now, the common label is the imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
where, you look at others and then you compare yourself and you think, why would anyone listen to me? Why do I have the right to do this or say this or put this out there,
Yeah.
whatever that might be? Yeah, I mean that was huge. I was helping people in foreclosure for a while, even went to work for a startup company and stopped my own business, and we were doing it over the telephone. That's where I really learned how to sell. You want to talk about sales, help somebody who hasn't made a payment on their house for a while and they're in foreclosure and they don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And you have to do it all over the phone, right? You can't, I call it cheating. You can't cheat face to face, right? And build
Right.
trust in relationships. You got to do it over the phone, not video. And so I started writing a book after that, like that experience when I was transitioning to something else. And I was writing this book and I probably got, 40, 50 pages in. And I thought, who am I to write this book? Who's going to listen to me? I'm some guy with a marine biology degree that did, this thing with people in foreclosure for 5 years, 6 years. Why would anyone listen to me? So I stopped and I just threw it away. And, I've done that a couple of times. And I think that just pops up all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where the internet has made it even more difficult. And there's something I heard from, there's a guy, his name is Pastor Stephen Furtick, and he runs a church. But he did this, he did this session about expectations and things like that. And whether you're religious or not, the message is huge and it stuck with me for the longest time, is what you got to be careful of, and where this really hurts people is when you compare your behind the scenes with other people's highlight reels, which is what he would say, right? Like when you're
Yes.
online and you're scrolling through, even if it's like LinkedIn, even if you're in business like I
Yes.
am, or like
Yeah.
you are, right? We scroll through LinkedIn, you see what everyone else is posting online about how great their business is, or how many clients they have, or how many people they help, or what they do. And then you're thinking about your behind the scenes and you're going, my life is a mess. I'm a hot mess. I don't have enough clients. Why am like, blah, 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 like this reel inside your head. And that's not fair, right?
Yeah.
Because they're behind the scenes. Everyone's behind the scenes is just as messy. They're just better at posting and
absolutely.
publicity and pictures. And I think that's and then it's realizing maybe you're not them, which is great because you're you. And then what message do you have that could resonate with somebody?
Yeah.
Not everybody, but somebody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You put a quote in your book, and Teddy Roosevelt is obviously a very, he was a fascinating human being, and I had never heard this quote before. I do read a lot of Ryan Holiday, and he tends to quote Teddy Roosevelt quite often, but you had quoted him saying, "Comparison is the thief of all joy." And that quote hit hard on me because it truly, truly is. And when we think about creating and creativity, you and I are obviously both in the podcast space. We like to create, we like to do things to scratch that itch. And when we look at other podcasts, or even just larger podcasts that are getting 10,000, 100,000, a million downloads a month, and or at least I'm speaking for myself, and I look at my numbers, I'm like, wow, what am I doing wrong that I am not garnering the attention of these media outlets or these big name celebrities? And I have to reel that in every single day to reset my expectations, because I know that what I'm doing for me is coming from a place of integrity. I'm not saying that other people are not doing the same thing, but I know that I'm doing this in a way that I feel good about. And I think there's a big difference. And you even highlight that significantly in your book, talking about different types of salespeople. I have to do this so it makes me feel good, and not so I can monetize it and start making, $5,000 an episode or whatever that number may be. And to me, that has been so
Yeah.
incredibly important.
And I think one of the big keys too, and this is what I've learned, and sometimes I actively look for it when that part of my brain kicks in, and we can talk about where this all comes from. And I know you've talked about it with many guests on your show about the primal part of the brain and the fears and the survival side. But, if we look at that Joe Rogan kind of example, right? So a huge contract with Spotify, most well-paid podcaster, plus everything else he has going on.
Yeah.
This dude has been at it for a long time. This is the thing, is we all do this. So I'll speak from my own mind. As I see someone, I'm like, oh man, this seems so easy for them. Like they're just crushing it. And what you don't see is everything before, right? Like, I'm going to butcher the quote, but I think there's another one, I was an overnight success. It just took me, 20 years to get here.
Yes.
And that's the case, right? Like, I know Joe Rogan from when he was on this show called News Radio, before he was doing Fear Factor, before he was doing all that other stuff. And I watched him on there a long time ago. We're talking like the 90s. So you think of someone like him, like he's been doing comedy performing for 30, 35 years. It's easy to look at that and go, man, he gets 100 million downloads or 100 million views a YouTube episode or whatever he might get. He's been grinding it for a long time. And one of the things I like to do is, if there's somebody on YouTube I'm following, or someone has a podcast that's like just this big numbers, I always love to go watch their first episodes. I go all the way back, right? And I try to go back as far as I can to find it. Or someone on Instagram with tons of followers, scroll back and find and not just like, I want to diminish what they're doing, but I want to set the right framework, which is, the other quote is, every master started as a disaster, right? Like everybody starts out and it's not great. What you see now is the greatness, but it took it's that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours or more for what you see. And the problem is we then compare, I'm not great. I'm not a master, right? Like I'm not at that level. But you're comparing your journey to their current place on their journey.
Yeah, that's so important. Thinking about, so the Mosaic Life podcast, this is my second go around with podcasting. So even though I know our first episode here probably wasn't that bad, it makes me, I don't know if cringe is the right word, but I don't like thinking about going back to where I was a year and a half ago. And that's not just even in the podcast world. I in my 20s, I'm not necessarily ashamed, but not necessarily proud of, who I was back then. I was just having this conversation. I used to think I was the best at everything that I did. I thought I could write, this beautiful blog post and, get it published in front of millions. And I was not that good. And I didn't have that notoriety, that recognition. But in my mind and my ego, I thought that was it. And so, when I think about going back and, I think I get this weird fear that I'm going to regress into who I used to be if I revisit my old work, which is so silly, and it's such a mind trick that I need to overcome. And I don't know, ego has played such a huge part in my development and actually the hindrance of my development prior to actually knowing what it was. And I know you talk a little bit about in your book as well. I mean, what role has ego played in your life, either for the benefit or the detriment?
Yeah, I mean, for me, luckily, and I don't know, maybe this is my ego saying this, but I don't feel like I have much of an ego. I've never been, I generally haven't been overly confident to what I would think is my own detriment.
Sure.
Right. I don't like, I haven't always liked feedback. I don't always like, someone listening to a meeting or a call or, back in the day in sales and then telling me what I did, could have done better or didn't do well. But I feel like the overconfident, destructive ego was never really my side. And it's the more confident I've gotten, the older and more experience I've gotten in various, areas, then I have this confidence and that ego, but then also always open to learning more and uncovering more things. where I see it the most, and what really was pointing out in the book is, see that salesperson, that person who's in sales, and they have this ego, which is just protecting them, kind of like what you were talking about, where they don't want feedback. They think they know it all. They don't need your system. They don't need your training. They don't need any of this. Just let me do what I do because I'm the greatest at it. It's like, well, but either A, you're not the greatest at it because the numbers show you're not the greatest, or even the greatest. And this is what you see a lot in really top performers, the really greats, like Tiger Woods at his peak, I was reported to have 7 different coaches. So he had this confidence. He had this ego that, hey, on the golf course, I am the best and I'm going to rock. And it takes a village. Like, I know I need a lot of help to get there. And that balance, I think, is the key in that fine line with our primitive primal brain that just doesn't understand the current world.
The Mosaic Life podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the full show notes at themosaiclifepodcast.com and sign up for the Circle newsletter for exclusive access to podcast content.